special call work session to order. Let the record show that all council members are present. I've been getting a lot of information from the public in the last few days, weeks, and there seems to be a lot of misinformation and confusion out there. And I think that the reason I called this meeting was to get the facts so everybody is on the same page. Our last meeting was a special called actual council meeting where no public comment was allowed. The reason I call this work session is so we can have public comment. And there's a man that was here the last week that wasn't allowed to speak that I think is very important to this discussion. And I'd like to go ahead and let us start off because he needs to be in another town at a different meeting, but he has delayed that somewhat so he can be here and speak with us. So I'd like to get Jim Bledsoe with TWRA to come up here and go ahead and start our discussion, please. And welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Mayberry, and council members. I'm Jim Bledsoe. I'm a former commissioner. Well, I'm still on the commission until tomorrow, I guess, for the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission. And 2 years ago, when we started this process of getting the shooting facility over here, I was chairman of the commission and worked pretty closely on the project. And then last year, I helped organize the fall commission meeting in Cumberland County. We met at the library and formally made a budget amendment of $2,242,500 to the shooting park project. Now, I want to start out by saying the piece of property that you have here, one other thing, it was strategically picked because of the location, proximity to the interstate, accessibility. We have shooting facilities from one end of the state. We've got one in Carroll County, we've got one in Greene County. We're building one at Lone Oaks in West Tennessee for the University of Tennessee. This was going to be our Middle Tennessee focus area. And we wanted to get it scattered across the state for the public to have access to and for our scholastic clay teams to utilize to benefit our youth. Now, this piece of property from the beginning has been tied to the project because doing a federal match, this is through Hunter education dollars, and it is not state dollars, it's not license fees, it is a federal match through Hunter education, which comes from the Pittman-Robertson Act. And that piece of property was part of the 25% match that was put up. We have to give a 25% match to get the federal funds. And so that piece of property is essential to this project. Without it, you start all over from ground one. You have to go through a new grant writing process, and you'll have to go before a new commission. Like I said, I roll off the commission tomorrow when they have their March commission meeting, and you've got 6 new commissioners on a 13-member board. So, and none of them are really from this area, so there's no guarantees one way or the other. Another thing, if groundwork isn't started pretty soon, June 30th, TWRA's budget ends for the fiscal year and it rolls over. It has to go before the commission again, and like I said, there's no guarantees that that money will be rolled over. It's a process that happens if on any project. If it's not completed or started, then it has to go before the commission to get voted on again. So I just kind of wanted to come to you and say that this property is essential. It was strategically picked. It does help make the match for the federal grants. And like I said, I would like to see this project carried forward because if we have to back up and punt, there's no guarantees that it's going to come to this area. So,
Does this You said you had to go through you'd have to go through the grant writing process again.
Because this project is tied to the match.
Okay. And who picks the winner of the grant? Was that your commission?
Yeah, well, the commission done the budget allocation for it, yes. So it would have to go back before the commission again.
Those are the people that actually decide who gets to do what.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what the Tennessee Wildlife Commission is, it's a 13-member board, and they're the governing body of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. And there's 9 commissioners picked by the governor, and 4 picked by the speaker, 2 by the Speaker of the House, 2 by the Speaker of the Senate. And they're a non-paid, we don't get paid, but we make the rules and make the decisions for TWRA, and then they enforce it. So, but it would have to go back before that commission. And there's, sadly to say, there's no commissioners close to this area now.
If you'd won a grant and then didn't follow through with it, the odds of...
We had that happen several years ago. We had Dyersburg was going to put in a facility like this, and they had some complications, and they pulled back. They put the money on hold, and when it rolled around, you got Carroll County range now. So, like I said, there's no guarantees when it rolls back around, but there is some other interest in other areas of the state. I know Chattanooga was a focal point, so I'm not saying that's where one might go, but that's, hopefully we can get one on the Upper Cumberland, so it's kind of centrally located in the state. But,
does anyone have any questions for Mr. Bledsoe?
I do.
Yes.
We had some communication, or I should say our city manager had some communication with a gentleman from TWRA named Matt.
yeah, Matt Clary, he's right here, Captain Matt Clary, he's law enforcement.
According to the information that he shared with us, potentially the grant could be rolled over to the next fiscal year.
Yes, it can.
It can be, if approved by this governing body of 13 members.
Right, it has to go before the commission after June 30th to be reapproved.
And it wasn't necessarily tied to this specific piece of property, the way we understood, because
Actually,
it's tied to the features that would be built in the shooting range versus the piece of property.
Actually, this grant is tied to the piece of property
Is
because
that in writing?
that was the federal match for the grant.
Is that in writing?
I'm assuming when the grant was written, there had to be a federal match, so
Did they say
I'm not the one.
the
Barry Sumner's is our grant
The grant as it was
writer.
written, did it say that the match would be the piece of property or that the match would be in money? Did it specify or lay that out?
It's 25% of $2,242,000, and it could be, for this particular grant, it was that piece of property and in-kind services, which is the money that goes into building the facility.
If I may interject just a second here, I attempted to send you all an email, and I don't know if you got the whole thing the other day. This would have been last Tuesday. It was a letter from Barry Sumners, and he's
the assistant director for TWRA. He's the number 2.
There was also a letter attached to that from the United States Department of the Interior, Fish and Wildlife, Mr. Piccarilli. And in the letter, it said, we received federal grant approval after submitting documents that support constructing the project at the Fry Road site. This included an evaluation of the impact on endangered species and approval from the State Historic Preservation Office. If the location is changed, we could reapply to Fish and Wildlife Service after securing the required compliance documents and request that we be allowed to construct the range at a different site. Doing so would introduce a lot of uncertainty since we don't know if a different site would comply with the federal requirements. It's quite possible that we would not find the approvable site and funding would revert. They're referring to all the environmental impact studies that have been done on that, and that you could apply if you don't use it. But then the accompanying letter from the United States Department of Interior mentions that the property the proposal is promised on using the lease value of the land over a 20-year life of the project. So this is confirming that this piece of property is what's tied to this project. The land was appraised and determined to be a total value, and the lease value was determined based on 5% per year of the total land value. At this time, we have no objections to using the lease value of the property as a match for the grant. Please note the state's match lease value is now incorporated into the approval of this award. So this is the approval of the award, as it says. Then it goes on to talk about that they won't deal with leases when it comes to marinas and things like that.
There was it's called a yellow book appraisal, which is for federal grants. It meets all the federal standards, and that was done on this piece of property along with all the environmentals and ecological surveys and stuff that we had to, the hoops we had to jump through to do. And I'll go ahead and say there's not a lot of pieces of property that meet all the criteria, and this one did, so. Yes.
Mr. Bledsoe, does TWRA, in most instances like this, where shooting parks or other facilities are proposed, do they recommend public hearings, whether it's required or not? Do you recommend public hearings? And did the TWRA recommend a public hearing for this particular shooting park?
I do not know if we recommended one. I know all of our meetings are public, so the meeting we had about the shooting park over here was publicly announced and had, most of the people there were windmill people, but we didn't have any shooting park people there. I mean, there were several, some of the Scholastic Clay people were there to see the budget get passed. I know Mayor Carey was there.
What was that meeting advertised as a meeting to address the
It was
shooting
a
park?
public advertised meeting. The shooting park was on the agenda, but it was not specifically for that shooting park. We had several that was our budget meeting for the year, so.
So it was a budget meeting.
Well, it's our commission meeting, but certain meetings of the year, we do season setting for wildlife, certain, which is season setting for fisheries.
Where was that meeting held?
The library in Crossville. But it was not specifically announced for a public meeting, but it was on the agenda. And it is a publicly announced meeting, and it was announced statewide. So, I do recommend public hearing, and we can get public opinion, majority rules. So, but that's my personal opinion.
Well, we've had several public meetings in the past and not had quite this turnout. This is being considered a work session. Of course, in reference to this discussion, I was confused when I said that the discussion started June the 11th, 2015. I found out it actually started June the 4th, 2015, with an article that was in the Chronicle is published. Originally that discussion was talking about us taking over building inspections, but it got into discussion on the shooting park, which has been very well published. Are there any more questions for Mr. Bledsoe?
I think that the mayor was advertised as a city-county joint venture. Is that right?
That's what the headline is right there.
Shooting park. I'd like to make a statement if I could, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
The action this council took, acting on the agreement that was with the nonprofit group, it was prepared by the city attorney and the nonprofit attorney. This council was just acting on the provisions in this agreement. It plainly said in the beginning, without public outcry. Sort of put us, if you look at it, if you look at the agreement, if we went ahead and let this thing fly through, we'd be violating our own agreement.
Like I said, I recommend a public meeting. I mean, that's my personal opinion, and let majority rule. But I hate to see the vote the other day be the end of this project.
I have a question. In choosing the property that was chosen, is it taken into account the number of homes that are around that property because of the noise factor?
I would have to defer that to maybe Andrew Piercy from Tennessee Wildlife Federation. They do more shooting parks than I do.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to come up, Mr. Pearson?
I can speak a little bit to this answer. We do take that into consideration when we make recommendations. We did not make a lot of recommendations on this one in particular. I've kind of spoken with several different individuals about this piece of property, but we didn't make a lot of recommendations on this one specifically. But in others, we do usually recommend, look and see where they are in relation to houses, where the property is going to sit in relation to those houses, what other noise instruments are around, such as highways, interstates, other manufacturing. Where's the shooting facility going to be located on the property versus elevation, shrubberies, trees, things like that would mitigate some of those sounds. And then I know for a property in Madison County, Tennessee, we recently worked with, they actually went out and they knew where the range was going to be. They stood actually on the range, fired a few shots, and went out and tested at several different houses. So that's what we've worked with other ranges in the past about. But I have not done that on this piece of property in particular.
Some of the questions that we get, for example, I had one resident, property owner in the Chestnut Hill area, which as a crow flies might be approximately a mile from the site. They ask questions like this, and I'm not an expert by any means.
Okay.
But their questions are things such as, they ask about the public hearing. Will the shots fired fall on the proposed shooting range? That's a question.
I can say from looking at this property and consulting with the different organizations that have worked together to lay out the facility, it is sufficient size that the shots should all land within the property. And where the facilities are, even if they're pointed in a different direction, they'll be far enough away from the property line, they should land within the property.
If I could just kind of breeze through some of these types of questions. How wide is the existing road along Albert Fry? With the shooting range proposed, how wide would the road have to be? Would the right-of-way have to be bought if the road's widened? Can a nonprofit make property owners sell right-of-way? Those are the types of questions that you get. How many tournaments are you expected to get weekends during the week? Is it going to pull a lot more traffic onto that little road? Just all kinds of questions. You know what I'm saying? Just concerns from somebody who lives in that area.
Yes. The bulk of the use of this range would be by the practice group from the Cumberland County Clay Busters. They have roughly 52 athletes. They practice beginning in about February through July is the bulk of their practice time. Those athletes primarily practice in the late afternoon after schools and on Saturdays. As far as tournaments, there is, because of the size of the range, there's potentially one fair-sized tournament that would handle about 120, 130 people at the most, just due to the number of athletes that are in this area of the state. TWRA divides the state into 4 different regions, and we consider this region 3. And there is not another larger facility in the area to be able to handle the number of competitors that would happen. There's a significant number of athletes that are in Chattanooga area, and then there's in Clay County and some of them in White County. But all in all, for the competition they've had, the regional competitions the past 2 years, it's about 120 to 130 athletes at the most, and that's over about a 3-day weekend. So I don't we anticipate a lot of additional traffic on a regular basis. I know Fairfield Glade, which is their current practice location, I don't believe it has an extra turning lane, and I think it's just off a standard 2-lane road as well. So I know many of our other facilities across the state are off a similar 2-lane road. Henry Horton is one of the major ranges that they actually have to travel out of the region to be able to use for this area because there's not a facility large enough that it is on a standard 2-lane highway running through the middle of Chapel Hill, and that's one of our more popular state parks.
I think a lot of these questions we'll need to address to the members of the board. But was there something else that you'd like to add? And
I know this would provide a lot of economic impact on a certain amount of weekends because of the athletes that it will bring in from out of town. Like I said, there can travel from individuals in the Chattanooga area that can come down here and utilize this. And there is opportunities for other training that would bring individuals to the Crossville area that might not come on a regular basis. So that's one of the advantages that we saw with it. It would be a strategically priced range between Nashville and Knoxville for trainings and things to be able, for us to be able to hold in the area. It'd be more of a classroom-related facility. But one of the other things that Commissioner Bledsoe didn't mention, this is also going to be a hunter education facility. So it'd be used to provide a classroom and outdoor knowledge and work effort for TWRA and they're promoting hunter education in the state of Tennessee. Did I answer all your questions?
any other questions? Mr. Piercy?
I've got one.
Yes.
The noise. Tell us what you can tell us about that.
The noise, believe it or not, is actually less than the interstate. I have a piece of property in Putnam County that is 50 yards from the interstate, and it's a constant roar. A shooting facility does not have that. From some of the other studies we've looked at, it's about 50 to 60 decibel when you're actively shooting and you're kind of at the property line. If you're a good couple hundred yards away, that begins to diminish rather quickly. So if you think about it, they're at 50 to 60 decibels, maybe 70. Average interstate traffic is 85 decibels. So and that's kind of a fair compensation considering this property is actually not that far from the interstate as well. So I think between the interstate, you're going to muffle it a lot. There's a lot of vegetation on this property and a fair amount of elevation. So depending on where the shots are, it could mitigate a lot of those. And it's not continuous. You may have a fair amount of shots for a couple hours, but it's not just a constant roar like you would have like a NASCAR race or something like that with a lot of traffic going by. It's sporadic. It's usually going to be, I don't want to say in the evenings, but after work till about dusk, on Saturdays, and I know most ranges, most teams don't practice on Sunday morning anyway, so it's worst of all Sunday afternoon. So the noise doesn't seem to play that much of a factor. It sounds loud if we were to fire shotguns in this room, but if we were to get, have this an open area and fire them and be, a football field away, it might sound loud, but you wouldn't need to wear hearing protection that far away.
Any other questions for Mr. Piercy from the Tennessee Wildlife Federation? Thank you, sir. Any other for Mr. Bledsoe?
And I really think if they plant some trees or something around this place, it would help the aesthetics of it and be a noise buffer too, like you said, so. Anything else?
Yes, that's it. Thank you for coming by.
Hey, thank you for letting me talk. Appreciate it.
Who can tell us on the landscaping, what's going to be cleared? How much is going to be cleared? You've got this map up here. Of course, the city's retained 22 acres. I don't know how deep that footage is. mean, it's not gonna be clear cut and just an open field with these shooting stations out there. Mayor Carey, can you fill us in on what's cleared, and what's gonna be, and what the plan is?
If you'll indulge me, I'll try to provide you some information on a lot of things and hopefully clear up a lot of rumors on this project.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you to address some rumors about the proposed shooting park, which is much more than just a shooting park. This is a training facility that can be used by youth teams to enhance their skills and safety, firearms, archery, as well as a quality facility that would provide a place for our law enforcement agencies that protect us to be able to train in. With that, I will say that the current police chief has told me that he is in favor of the project. The sheriff has given us a letter that he's in favor of it. The previous two interim police chiefs were in favor of it. But there will be also a great deal of indoor training at this facility as well. I think you've heard that the funding is tied directly to the property, so I'm going to skip over that. I do want, before I forget it, I want to address Ms. Harris's question. Early on in this process, we were told that toward the end of it, we would need to provide adequate documentation that this had been addressed in public meetings that were open to the public. At some point later, Mr. Matt Cleary with TWRA became involved, and he became the one that we were working with directly. And I don't know, probably a couple months ago, Matt, maybe you asked for the documentation. And the question was asked of him.